What I'm about to tell you is going to sound like hyperbole. It's going to sound like I'm making it up. But after poring over the game logs from Paul Skenes' entire career as a pitcher, I believe the Cardinals just did something to the Pittsburgh Pirates phenom that has never happened to him in his entire baseball life. Ever. What's going on, everyone, and welcome into this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It is the early morning hours now of Wednesday, April 9th, 2025. The Cardinals just did it again. They found a way to beat Paul Skenes. The Redbirds did it 5-3 on Tuesday night in Pittsburgh, beating Skenes for the third time in his fledgling MLB career. He's a stud already. We know it. But of his 4 career losses at the big league level, the Cardinals are responsible now for 3 of them. Skenes did win a game against the Cardinals, but he's lost now 3 in a row, dating back to last year. June 11th, he didn't give up a run against the Cardinals the first time he ever faced them. But July 23rd, September 16th, and then tonight, April the 8th, the Cardinals got the better of Skenes. But the Cardinals did something tonight that has never been done to Paul Skenes, as far as I could tell, in his entire baseball career. Now, I admit, there's a possibility that somebody's got some footage that can prove me wrong on this. If they've gone back to his 8th grade year or previous to find this information and can prove it to me, I will concede. I will admit defeat. But I believe that the St. Louis Cardinals just became the first team ever in the entire life and times of Paul Skenes, the baseball player, to score 5 runs against him while he's pitching on the mound. I don't think it's ever happened. I looked up the game logs. I went through the minor league seasons. That didn't take particularly long because, of course, there was just one of them in 2024, and he didn't give up 5 runs at any of the levels that he pitched at. Didn't happen in AAA, didn't happen in AA, single A, rookie ball. So I don't have to go through those game logs to know. He never gave up 5 runs in any of those games because he didn't give up 5 runs at that level in its entirety. Couple of games here, couple of games there at each stop. What about college, though? Did he ever give up 5 earned runs in a college game? Or forget earned runs. Again, it's just runs scored against Paul Skenes. Not that I could find. LSU, Air Force, didn't happen. He was a reliever his first year at Air Force that he pitched. He pitched there 2 years. He also played in the Cape Cod League for, I'm gonna butcher the name, Wareham in Massachusetts. So I know I'm saying it wrong. But the point is, in 8 innings, he gave up 5 runs that summer. They didn't all come in the same game. And then you can go back to high school. There's not a single game log that I could find in which he gave up 5 runs. And I don't think it ever happened in his grade school days. It very well could have, right? We wouldn't probably know about it. Could have happened in 3rd grade for all we know. Okay, I get it. We're having a little fun with this video. But from everything I understand, Paul Skenes didn't really pick up being a full-time pitcher until a little bit later on in high school. Pitched a little bit as a freshman. I looked to find some game logs. I don't think he threw a pitch as a sophomore, at least in terms of what I could find on the prep stats types of websites that are accessible out there. Junior year of high school starts pitching more regularly. Senior year, I believe, was kind of cut short by COVID. I think he gave up maybe a run all season in however many innings that ended up being. But he didn't have a game as a high school pitcher in which he allowed 5 earned runs. Forget earned runs, just 5 runs in general never happened to Paul Skenes in high school. And it never happened to him in college. And it never happened to him in minor league baseball. And it had never happened to him in Major League Baseball until tonight. And it's your St. Louis Cardinals that got it done against him. Victor Scott II got it done against him. He was your leadoff hitter tonight, stepping in for Lars Nootbaar. He actually started in left field, which is where Nootbaar has been playing, so fair enough. Michael Ciani got the start in center, played some good defense out there for the Cardinals. Victor Scott with a big triple to get the scoring going in the 3rd inning against Skenes. Brendan Donovan made sure not to leave Vic stranded on the bases. He had to knock a couple of batters later to drive him in. 3-run 3rd, and then it was a 2-run 6th inning for the Cardinals against Paul Skenes, whose line ended up being 6 innings, 5 runs allowed. All of them were earned. He gave up 6 hits to the Redbird lineup, walked 1 and struck out 7. So still got his Ks as all was said and done, but the Cardinals got theirs against Paul Skenes with 5 runs, and it ends up holding up. And a good outing by Sonny Gray, and a pretty respectable outing for the bullpen, although they tried to make it interesting. As always seems to be the case recently, nothing ever comes easy. Jojo Romero getting into a spot of trouble, gave up a couple of hits, did record a walk, but then got the rescue mission going. Phil Maton, his first Cardinal save recorded tonight as he comes in, does end up giving up a base hit and allowing some of that damage from Romero to cross. But at the end of the day, he got the job done with a little bit of cushion. Cardinals win at 5-3 over the Pirates. They improved to 5-6 on the young season, and they've got a chance to, as you're listening to this podcast, hopefully Wednesday morning, they've got a chance to draw the series win and then return to a 500 record before returning home for what is going to be a really fun homestand as long as the weather cooperates. Obviously, things were getting washed out a little bit last week at Busch Stadium, and then in Boston, that was also the case. And now everybody's freezing their asses off in Pittsburgh, but hopefully things warm up a little bit. I've talked about the fact that I'll be at Friday night's game with a ticket, so that'll be fun as a spectator. Be out at the Budweiser Terrace if you want to say hello, because I'm going to be checking out that Friday Night Live they've got going on. I'm pretty excited about that. $5 beers, $5 hot dogs, $6 margaritas. Nope, I don't know how large the beers are. Don't know the size of the margaritas, but I do intend to find out. So that is where you will be able to find me on Friday night, Cardinals v. Phillies. Don't believe I'll be doing the post-game show on Sports Hub STL, and you may have to wait till the next morning for a podcast. No, I'm not going to get sloppy, but I do think it is going to be enjoyable to see what the Cardinals got going on with the Budweiser Terrace as they're making those initiatives to try to get the fans back into the stands. Obviously, the team performing on the field would go a long way toward helping that. And to the Cardinals' credit, they did that on Tuesday night. Sonny Gray was good, guys. I mean, this was a good bounce-back start from him. And really, you kind of say, well, what is he bouncing back from? Well, an ERA was about 5.5 coming into this one because of the way his last pitch against the Angels went with the grand slam by Logan O'Hoppe. And that kind of left a sour taste in not only the mouths of Cardinals fans probably about, what his numbers looked like, but also I think for Sonny Gray, it wasn't indicative of the way that he pitched in that game for the most part. It was crazy to see the way that last inning just sort of spiraled against him. Sometimes you give up a base runner. I remember it was Wilson Contreras at first base. Maybe could have been a double play ball. Couldn't handle it. Suddenly you got 2 guys on. You get the next batter 0-2. You plunk him in the back of the foot. Try to waste a pitch. Try to get him to change, and you overcook one. And next thing you know, the bases are loaded. Oliver Marmol comes to chat with you and doesn't go your way after you stay in the game and Logan O'Hoppe gets you. But tonight, Sonny Gray looked kind of like he looked for the first 6 innings of that game a handful of days ago. 5 innings, gave up 3 hits, 1 run. It was earned. It was a solo blast indeed. The home run ball is still coming back to bite him. But as we've talked about, and it's been a little while since we have gotten to say this phrase on the podcast, but I'm sure I have said it before, that Brian Reynolds is a stone-cold killer. And he stone-cold got Sonny Gray. I just think he's such a talented player, and his numbers don't necessarily reflect it this year, but they went up a little bit today. Reynolds now with a 651 OPS, but he was 2 for 4 and had that home run, scored a couple of runs in the game tonight. But Sonny Gray was good, and the Cardinals needed that kind of outing from him. There are questions, as always seems to be the case when it comes to the St. Louis Cardinals in 2025, about Ollie Marmol and the management and the way that he decided to handle the pitching staff. There weren't many of them. Maybe I am amplifying it when I shouldn't be even bringing it up, but I think it's a natural question for people to wonder, why 71 pitches are you taking Sonny Gray out of the game at that point? And I don't have any idea the degree to which Oliver Marmol addressed this, was asked about this postgame. If you haven't noticed yet, there's never going to be anything out there from FanDuel Sports Midwest on social media on the postgame stuff. Maybe it'll happen at some point. It hasn't yet. You could be a subscriber to their content. You can't find the postgame on the website. I challenge you to try. Let me know if you have success. My point is, when they're on the road and I'm not out there, might not always have the information. I am going to maybe have to develop a little bit of a better system to making sure that I leave my feed on the television and make sure I can rewind it and watch it later while it's still like locked in on my TV, because I genuinely don't know if there's a way to find it after the fact. So if you have a system to where you have been able to locate this and I'm the dummy that can't navigate the FanDuel stuff, yeah, let me know, because I have tried a number of ways to figure it out. My point is, I like to be informed. Even when I'm not covering a game, I like to be informed, to know what the manager said, to be able to tell you guys, hey, I heard him say this, and obviously would credit FanDuel Sports Midwest, but I don't have the information. I don't happen to know it this time, and I didn't ask. So anyway, that being said, I can speculate on what I think about this. 71 pitches, not very many pitches, but it was really, really cold. And something we know to be the case about Sonny Gray is he is not shy about communicating. He will tell the manager exactly where he's at. And I sincerely doubt it was a situation where Sonny Gray was lobbying to stay in a game and Oliver Marmol said, no, we got to take you out after 5. I think there is a working relationship and a trust between those two. And I'm not really going to be in the business of ever questioning, especially without knowing and being able to hear the postgame, ever questioning that Oliver Marmol took Sonny Gray out too early. Because if that's your impression, I have a guess as to why that might have happened. There was probably a mutual understanding and conversation between the two parties, and that was the decision that they arrived upon. I don't think it's going to be incredibly uncommon to see Sonny Gray out after 5. I think when he's hyper efficient, probably can get him through 6. I think tonight, if it's a 50-degree night in Pittsburgh instead of a 30-degree night in Pittsburgh, he goes back out for the 6th. But no reason to necessarily push it when they felt they had the additional bullpen coverage. After only using a couple of guys yesterday, you do have tomorrow's game to get through, but the bullpen was taxed. It's not quite as taxed at this point, and we'll see. Maybe they're still in the works to potentially add an arm and begin that Memphis shuttle. I don't know if that's imminent prior to Wednesday's game because it's basically a morning start when you consider Central Time. But the Cardinals did use Matz, Leahy, Romero, and ended up using Phil Maton out of the bullpen. Leahy covered really well, man. He's been good. 1.35 ERA, actually had 3 strikeouts tonight, too, in an inning and 2/3 of work. So his numbers are solid, and the trust, he's getting in that circle for Ollie Marmol if he wasn't there already. Steven Matz did a nice job inning in the 3rd. Would they go with him on a back-to-back? I don't know. We'll end up seeing what that looks like. They do need more than the 3 or so innings that Eric Fetty gave him 5 days ago in terms of what he can provide on Wednesday, but I think ultimately he gets through the standard 5 or 6. They'll have enough bullpen coverage, and it's really not that big of a storyline, in my opinion, that Sonny Gray leaves after 5, considering the frigid temperatures. And even if it wasn't frigid temperatures, like I said, I think that with Sonny Gray in particular, that decision's always going to be made at the right time. Now, you could make a case that the previous outing, he was left out there a little bit too long, but that was a night that he was hyper-efficient. The weather wasn't a factor, and Ollie tried to stretch him out into the 7th inning, and of course, I'm still talking about the Angels outing that Sonny Gray had. Didn't have a problem with that one. Can make a case that when he went out for that mound visit, when the bases were loaded before the Ohapi at bat, you might have looked to have done something different. But I wasn't covering that game on April the 2nd, so I can't definitively tell you exactly what maybe was said about that one post-game. And I'll try to do a better job of that, of being able to be in the know even when I'm not covering a game, so that we're working with the best information when I'm updating you guys on something. But this is like when we're talking about getting in the weeds about pitching decisions, I just don't want to speak for the Cardinal manager when I haven't heard what he said about a given pitching decision. This wasn't even a decision. This was a non-factor in my opinion. If I had to guess, it was related to the weather and the fact that you did maybe prolong him a little bit too long the last time out, or whether it was too long or not, you know what the result was. He ended up giving up a grand slam on his last pitch. And so this time you say, all right, let's get him out of there feeling good about things. We've got a lead on Paul Skenes. Let's just try to let our bullpen fire bullets at the Pirates and be able to get out of here. And the Cardinals then ended up getting more off of Paul Skenes in the 6th, which I say more, that probably contributed maybe to the decision. I don't know. Skenes was still in the game. Sonny Gray was still in the game when the Cardinals scored those 2 runs. And so coming back out, or do you go with 4-run lead, start working through your bullpen and making sure you find a way to win this game because you are on a 4-game losing skid. Cardinals had lost 6 out of 7, and it was probably just time to make sure that they got one home. So I had no issue with it. I think Sonny Gray probably had no issue with it. And I would recommend Cardinals fans not having issues with it. But I understand that that's not always going to be the case. That is just the nature of the beast. But the Cardinals tonight, getting it done offensively. I mean, their 5 runs off of Paul Skenes being as much of a rarity as they were against him is kind of just another data point in the consistent drumbeat that this Cardinal team has had offensively so far this season. I believe that they have scored 4 or more runs in every game so far this season, which is approaching, according to the game story I saw from MLB.com, a National League record for the most consecutive games to begin a season with 4 or more runs scored. I believe they're one shy of that mark, according to, again, MLB.com, the hat tip for that stat. That's kind of significant in my opinion, because that's exactly what we kind of talked about last year when it came to entering the 2024 season. I remember describing that this was a Cardinals team that the way they were constructed, I felt they would need to be a team that led the league in the number of times that they scored 4 runs. You'd like to score 5 as many times as you could, but I felt it would be imperative that the Cardinals would limit the occasions in which they got shut out, which is, duh, can't win a game if you're shut out. But the 1-run, 2-run, and 3-run outings, I just felt were not going to be enough last year. And I was kind of wrong, partially because of how darn good the bullpen was. The Cardinals ended up doing very well in 1-run games, and I'd have to go back and check the stats, but I feel like they fared better than the average in being able to clip off some of those 2-1, 2-0, 1-0, 3-1, those types of games. Again, it's anecdotal. I don't have data to back that up, but it just kind of felt like every so often the Cardinals would get that type of win, and I didn't really believe it would be possible coming into 2024. I said, you picked up a pitching staff like Sonny Gray. That's a great add. Hopefully he's a frontline starter, and largely he was for them last year. Got bit by the home run ball a little bit, but that's already happening this year too. But I feel like you'll see him settle into being the Cardinals' most effective starter when it's all said and done. But the other guys that they added last year, Lance Lynn, Kyle Gibson, it's not that I didn't think they were sensible additions. I think if I went back and listened to my podcasts on the topic, I praised the Cardinals for getting out in front of the market, grabbing guys that they knew fit the roles that they were looking to fill. The Cardinals, coming off of 2023, wanted to be very, very certain that the bottom of their rotation didn't fall out like a trapdoor, because that's what happened in 2023. They wanted stability. They wanted a floor outcome from their starting rotation. They weren't chasing a ceiling outcome necessarily, going with younger, less proven arms, but guys that might have higher upside than, say, a Lance Lynn or a Kyle Gibson at the respective stages of their careers that they were in 2024. They went for the floor play. They went for the safe, conservative play to just get back to square one. And they were hoping the offense would be better than 22nd in runs scored to be able to lift the team up with a very underwhelming but stable starting rotation. That was the way they were built. They were built, though, with guys that would take the ball. What do we always hear? They're going to take the ball 30 times. Lance Lynn didn't quite get to that mark because injuries got him. And to his credit, he was pitching through injuries, it sounds like, all year. If you went back and listened to the podcast episode that he had with his wife where he announced his retirement last week, he was dealing with all sorts of things, and the knee was chief among them. But he gave the Cardinals what he could give them. Kyle Gibson, sturdy, steady, takes the ball. The plan, though, was, hey, get these guys through 6 innings. We got to be able to just get through the season. Give us some reliable starters that have been around the block and can do it, know what it's about. But sometimes that would mean giving up 4 or 5 runs in those 6 innings. Kyle Gibson had a number of starts, it seemed, where he'd give up runs early, but he'd find a way. 6th inning would roll around, and he's still out there grinding through an outing to try to make sure you do your part as a starter. I think it's such an underrated aspect of it, because when we're having these conversations about the bullpen struggling in times where that takes place, when you have a start like Eric Fetty's 5 days ago, sort of sets the chain reaction in motion. Okay, now guys have to fill more innings. Now the bullpen's going to be a little bit more worn. What if the bullpen is just happening to not perform well at the time? Whether it's because the players aren't as good as you need them to be, or they're just lacking execution in this point in time. Relievers are very fickle. It's going to be some zigs, some zags, some yin, some yang. It's just going to be the way that relievers go. But when they're tired, you can expect it's going to be probably more of the negative side of what their production could end up looking like. So it was very important to have those guys last year that could just take the ball and give you the stats. But what it meant, getting off on a little bit of a side tangent, but I think it's kind of brick by brick foundational to the way that I view this year's team relative to last year's team. The Cardinal offense didn't become that team that scored 4 or 5 runs every single day often enough. I think they were built as a team that could have won a lot of 4-5, 6-5 games last year, where those starters who maybe they go 6 innings and give up 4 runs, and that's a 6 ERA for that day. And at the end of the season, their ERA's in the 4s like Gibby's was, and Lynn was a little bit below 4, but gave up an inordinate amount of unearned runs to where made his stats look a little bit better than maybe they were in terms of total runs given up. But those pitchers would get done with the 6th inning, and it would be, 5-4 Cardinals, in theory. And then they did have the back end of the bullpen to go 7, 8, 9 and win those types of games. I thought that would have to be a regular occurrence last year. It didn't end up exactly playing out that way. But I think you're right back into that situation again this year, with the exception being you don't have the sturdy. You don't have the veteran guys. They have veteran pitchers, but we can talk about their identities and maybe the way they differ from the way that we viewed, or at least I viewed and agreed with the Cardinals' assessment of Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson, is those guys that would take the ball, get you through 6, be able to save your bullpen. Even on a day where they didn't have their best stuff, they would find a way to go out and pitch. And ideally keep a team in the game, not get firebombed too many times. This year's team and the veterans in their rotation haven't yet been able to adopt that mentality, or if they have the mentality, they haven't been able to put it quite into practice. Eric Fetty, short start his last time at Miles Michaelis on Sunday, very short start. And again, it's not to say that I couldn't go back through the game logs and find something similar that happened to Gibson or happened to Lynn, but it seemed like generally, especially Gibson, as they had those moments, they were able to still pitch through them and give the Cardinals 5 or 6. This year's team, I think, with how we rate the rotation, wherever you think they're going to rank in starters ERA, it's probably not, nobody's out here saying, it's going to be a top 10 rotation in terms of starters ERA. I don't know that many of y'all out there would say top 15 or maybe even some top 20. And it's fine to not say that, and it doesn't make you just this overwhelming pessimist when it comes to the rotation, because last year's starting pitching ERA for the Cardinals was 20th in MLB. So for them to improve upon that while losing Gibson, while losing Lynn, is certainly a possibility, but it's more of that uncertainty, I think, mixed in, that if it's going to happen, it's going to come from situations that you can hope take place, but you can't necessarily be sure will. Like Miles Michaelis is not going to have a 5.35 ERA. He's going to improve. We'll see. Steven Matz is going to not have an ERA in the 5s, and he's also going to be healthy long enough to stay, take more starts and contribute the more quality production that you hope he gives. We'll see. He hasn't been installed yet into the rotation. I still think the Cardinals will make that happen this time next week. Matthew Liberatore. Talk about upside. He's certainly got it, but he's also got the downside of, can he get the Cardinals the type of production they're looking for? Can he get through a lineup 2 times? And then a sprinkle on top of that to be able to say he went 6 innings. Yeah, so far the answer has been yes. He's done it twice. Hasn't limited the runs necessarily enough. Gave up 3, then gave up 5, so the ERA is a little spotty at this point. But what does that end up looking like? We talked a little bit about Sonny Gray, and then there's Eric Fetty. I don't know what he's going to give you. I think it's going to be a lot better than what he gave you the last time out. Last year with the Cardinals, he was a 3.72 ERA. He was even better than that with the White Sox. Hopefully that game against Boston is just kind of a one-off, and it only feels worse than it is right now because it was one of his first outings of the season and ultimately isn't indicative of the season he's going to have for St. Louis. But even within all of those guys in that group, you're not necessarily looking at this rotation thinking it's going to be a bunch of world beaters. And I neglected to mention Palante, and that's probably not fair to Palante because he had really good numbers last year and is off to a solid enough start this year, although didn't quite get through 5 innings in his most recent start. I think there's reason to believe that he's going to have a very steady year like he did last year once he came in the rotation, but there's also the potential for some regression, and I think you'll deal with that time to time, just the way that Miles Michaelis gave up 11 hits the other day in Boston. Palante's going to have his moments where he gives up more contact, which leads to more base hits on the days where you don't find those batted balls landing in the gloves. My point with all this is like the rotation this year is somewhat in a similar spot as last year, except I don't think you have quite the same level of faith that guys who struggle early are going to guaranteed get you through those 6 innings. Interestingly enough, to this point, Matthew Liberatore almost has embodied that mentality better than anybody, or that sentiment better than anybody else in the rotation, having given up a couple of crooked numbers early in both of his starts and has still gotten you through 6 or more innings in both of his starts. So that's encouraging that he has been able to kind of take that mindset and put it into practice. We'll see what happens. But at the end of the day, you're probably still seeing your starters generally giving up 2, 3, 4, maybe sometimes 5 runs. This year's team needs to be the one, like last year's team was just unable to do due to issues with runners in scoring position, to score consistently in that 4 to 5 range. And if you could make it 6, it's even better. I know that you're giving up 18 runs one day against Boston. You're giving up 8 runs yesterday against the Pirates. Those games are going to happen. I think more often than not, you're going to see Cardinals opponents land in that 4-ish range. And so it becomes a very significant number for the Cardinals to score their 4. And then maybe 5, 6. To have this start with 11 games in a row to begin the season scoring 4 or more runs, one from tying the National League record, that is kind of a big deal, and I think it's indicative of a reason that the Cardinals may have still a lane toward being a pretty successful team this year. It's the offense. The bummer of it is that the offense is already suffering some attrition. Herrera was looking like their best hitter for a little bit there, and they're going to be without him for a month. Hopefully it's not much longer than that, but there's really not a lot of ways to tell at this early stage of what his recovery is going to look like from the bone bruise. And I also think it's not great to not have Nolan Gorman, although we have seen Thomas Saggese come up, just as we always said throughout the entire spring that he would if there was an injury to just about anybody on the team other than a catcher. You'd probably see a guy like Thomas Saggese coming up and stepping in. And that's basically what has happened, and he's going to continue to get some opportunities for as long as Gorman is out. Thankful that you see Pedro Pages, I'm sure, contributing offensively the way that he still has, and even Joel Pozo with the home run on Monday night was good to see from him at the plate. So maybe the Cardinals still have enough punch to be able to continue this trend. You're seeing a couple of guys backslide where Jordan Walker has an 0 for day, although he did make a big-time catch in right field. I don't know what the StatCast probability would have said about that. It probably wouldn't have made too big of a deal of it. But given the situation, given that it was kind of like one of those knuckling liner type of hits over his shoulder, to be able to track the ball and just make sure that nothing crazy happened, because something crazy would have lost the Cardinals the game probably in that moment. So wanted to make sure to shout out Jordan Walker for a nicely handled defensive situation late in that game. There was no hands team out, right? Like, he was still out there in right field, played the full game, and ends up making the final catch of the game. So that was, for those who are kind of monitoring what the progress looks like for Jordan Walker defensively, that was a great sign to see. A little lesser night at the plate. Wilson Contreras struggling with another 0-for, or I say another, I don't remember yesterday exactly what he did, but he was 0-for with 3 Ks, and he's hitting .093. To the questions of what do you do with Contreras, yes, I move him down in the lineup. I move him to third, where I wanted to see him all along, because I think it suits its game better. I can remember him talking about not particularly wanting to be a leadoff hitter, lamenting that the Cubs had done it to him at times in the past. No, number 2 is not leadoff, but it's close enough to it. Give the guy a little bit more time to acclimate to the game. That would be my thought, especially at this point when he is clearly probably dealing with some of the mental ramifications and the psyche ramifications of getting off to such a sluggish start while trying to play a new position. Like, he probably doesn't quite feel like himself. I haven't asked him. Cardinals have been on the road, but I if I had to guess, that's probably a little bit related to what he's experiencing. He is going to be just fine, but expedite that process and maybe just continue to shake the trees and see what coconuts fall out, right? Just move him around in the lineup. Don't punitively drop him. I've seen Cardinals fans say, oh, send him to Memphis or drop him into the 9-hole. No, I wouldn't do that. I'd put him to 3 because I think his game is more predicated upon being able to come up in those RBI situations. Now, granted, he could have been in that RBI situation today with Victor Scott on third base ahead of him. Donovan ended up being the guy that drove him in. So maybe that's just a bunch of hogwash that I'm putting out there. I just don't think Wilson Contreras is a 2-hitter. I don't have a lot of rhyme or reason to it. I think he's more of a number 3. Plop him right there in what I consider to be the most prominent spot in the lineup. I know the analytics and the sabermetrics would tell you it's number 2. Put him number 3 and see what happens. Sometimes, whatever we think about our sabermetrics, I think the baseball players that are actually out there doing it sometimes have the human element that gets factored in. And I just think Wilson Contreras is more comfortable a little bit lower in the lineup. I wouldn't hesitate to move him to number 5 necessarily either. But the problem is you're looking at a lot of the left-handed talent in this lineup, and those are the guys that are more often producing. Lars Nootbaar, Victor Scott's an OPS over 850. Donovan has an OPS now up over 1,000. Called my shot on him having a great series. He's got 5 hits in 2 days since I told Stephen Carey on the Sports Hub show that I had Donovan as my pick to click in this series. Yeah, he was on base 3 times today. He's up to a 395 average and a 1043 OPS. He should be featured prominently in this lineup. I would just switch him and Contreras. I know that Ollie Marmol probably won't do it because it sets you up to have lefty relievers be able to try to mow through you late in the game. But I got to tell you, I don't know how many managers are necessarily factoring in their relief choice based on, not wanting to get into a bad matchup with Wilson Contreras right now. They probably bring the lefty in anyway and just let Contreras face him because he is just going through a bit of a tough time. My opinion, though, is Contreras being a little bit lower in the order. Not in a punitive way that's like 7, 8, 9, but like 3 or 5. The only reason I don't say 4 is because that's Arenado's spot, and I think you get the most out of him by not moving him. I would do it that way. It's just that I don't really know to be able to maintain a left-right, or however you want to frame it. Which right-hander do you end up bringing up higher in the lineup? Mason Wynn might be the best choice if you wanted to try to mix it up a little bit. And, maybe you go Scott or Nootbaar, whoever's playing left field that day. Normally it's going to be Newt. You go Scott, Wynn, or Nootbaar, Wynn, Donovan, Arenado, and then let the 4 or 5 be the 2 right-handers in a row and go Contreras behind Arenado, just to give him something to look at differently. Just to make, like, he's going to get a chance to see how a right-hander attacks a right-hander right ahead of him. And you kind of have to have it at some point in your lineup because you do still have, I believe, generally 5 right-handers to 4 left-handers on a given day. So maybe that's a way that you do it and give Wilson Contreras a bit of a different look. Burleson can be 6, Walker 7, and on the way down. Mason Wynn has been performing really well. I'll click his name here because I think they'll probably give us a nice, tidy little last 7 games type of deal when it comes to his splits because he's really turned it around more recently for the Cardinals. Let me see what I can find here. Last 7 games, indeed, 370 average, a 433 on base, and a 481 slug. I think his hitting streak is now up to maybe 6 or 7 games. It might not be quite to that extent. But, yeah, it's to the point where he's turned it around completely. 6 games in a row. And for 4 of those games, he had multiple hits. So he has been trending in the right direction. On April the 1st, he finished with a 0 average still. He's now up to a 244 batting mark for the season. So nicely done by Mason Wynn to be able to find your way through it. Maybe he's your number 2 hitter. Maybe you move Mason Wynn back to leadoff and you put Nootbaar at number 2, and then you go Contreras, Arenado, 3 and 4. You get your right, left, right. It just happens to start with a righty, Mason Wynn. I also like Mason Wynn batting 9th. Maybe the lineup doesn't really need to change when the Cardinals are setting a record or approaching a National League record for the number of games that they have begun the season scoring 4 or more runs. This is just the kind of stuff that we like to do on the podcast because I know it's the stuff that fans talk about. Lineup machinations. It's fun. It's lighthearted. And really there is no right or wrong answer necessarily. Because you could put a guy in a spot in the lineup that somebody else thinks makes no sense, and then that guy could go off, and turns out it was the perfect, correct decision. Victor Scott, by the way, is a guy that I don't hate seeing up there very prominently featured in the lineup. 2 for 5 with a triple and a double tonight. A couple of RBIs on that RBI triple, and did end up scoring on the Donovan hit for his lone run of the day. And he is now hitting 297 with an 858 OPS. So a lot of good choices, I think, for Oliver Marmol when it comes to the lineup. I would just put Contreras anywhere but leadoff or second. I would just see him drop him down a little bit, not a lot, because I think he's going to end up being just fine. Will the Cardinals end up being just fine? I think it's a big game on Wednesday. I think winning that series finale, getting back to a 500 record, especially with some of the teams that you have coming into St. Louis, starting with the Phillies over the weekend, and then it's going to be the Astros in the midweek, and the Mets are who they play thereafter. certainly would be a good time for the Cardinals to go ahead and get their second series win of the season. And it's expected to be Eric Fedde going against, I believe, Mitch Keller, although I haven't looked at the pitching matchup projected for a couple of days. The Pirates haven't changed anything. The Cardinals haven't changed anything. That'll be your matchup, 11:35 Central on Wednesday, before what the Cardinals are hoping will end up being a happy flight as they get Thursday off and will prepare for the Phillies on Friday night. That, though, is going to do it for this edition of the show. I appreciate you guys for listening. I appreciate you guys for checking out the video description below, in which you can find the Discord link, which is free. I've seen a number of new people jump into the Discord, and we're just got people, just like you would on any other social media site, talking Cardinals and various things going on. It's all sorted based on the sport and the team that you want to talk about. The Cardinal conversation is primarily what goes on in there, especially this time of year. So if you're looking for a social media alternative and trying to find some friendlies, the b-schaeff Daily Discord is a good place to do that, to talk Cardinals throughout the season, developing a fun little community in there for sure. And check out the video description as well for a link to the Brenden Schaeffer YouTube membership, for which there is on the second membership tier, a couple of prices in there for a monthly contribution. There's a b-schaeff Daily Lounge, we call it, or the b-schaeff Lounge. I guess I should know what it's called. It's the lounge tier of the membership. If you'd like to join that, send me a direct message, too, on Twitter or somewhere if you did join the lounge tier, because I need to know your Discord name so we can get you into the private group chat. Okay, that is all of the plugging I will do for tonight. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on b-schaeff Daily. Peace.